Hello, and thank you so much for being here today. My presentation is entitled Artificial Intelligence and Virtual Exchange for the Development of Socioemotional Skills, and I'd like to focus today on new forms of communication. About myself, well, I could tell you many things, but since we only have between 15 and 20 minutes to give this presentation, let me just focus on three projects that I'm currently leading and that are part of the Symposium on Genders, Literatures, and Cultures. First of all, I'd like to focus on Socioemove. This is a project that combines virtual exchange with the development of socio-emotional skills. And I've been working within this project with the University of Limerick in Ireland and the University of Hawaii in the US. Not only that, but part of my contributions to this project that, like I said, I'm also co-leading together with my colleague Marga Vinagre, helped me secure a Fulbright grant to do some research at Harvard University. The second project I'd like to mention is actually, well, several projects that connect to the UNESCO's TALIS initiatives, the UNESCO chair TALIS contributions. And within this, in the Gender Literatures and Cultures Symposium, we're going to have the book launch of the Dominican Tales that we've compiled as part of a project focusing on female biographies, gender, equality, and entrepreneurship in the Dominican Republic. And last but not least, Decolonial. We're focusing on de-silencing voices from decolonial perspectives, again, with a gender perspective. And we don't have a dedicated website as in the other cases, in the case of the other two projects, but I'd like to invite you to take a look at the program of the Gen Lit called Symposium, because I'm sure you'll find very interesting and inspiring talks, workshops, and more. So what's in the agenda? First of all, I like to focus on AI and VR enhanced VE, and I like to point out different emerging communication modes that have really caught my eye. Then I'll move on to socio-emotional competencies and design thinking as a core 21st century skill. And I'd like to conclude with social justice and critical computer-assisted language learning, and how this discipline is contributing towards fostering endangered languages and cultures, this being one of the main themes of the symposium. Well, we don't really have a magic ball to see the future, but as Rickman reminded us a few years ago, there is not only one possible future, there are many futures that are possible, and which one becomes a reality will depend on our present actions. If we apply this to the context of education, teacher training, learning languages, using technologies for education and languages learning, well, we can see that it's very important to equip current and modern day learners with competencies that will help them thrive and function very successfully in the future and future society and future education with lifelong learning skills, and also with tolerance towards uncertainty, because the present is very liquid. You know, nowadays modernity, as Bauman would say, is liquid, is ever changing, and we don't really know what the future is going to bring. We don't really know what the future jobs are going to look like. So we need to, instead of giving them content and fix things that they need to learn and then they will be able to reproduce in their future workplace, obviously that won't happen. So instead of that, we need to equip them to be able to be lifelong learners, to become change agents in order to be able to face different 21st century challenges that they're going to face, that we're currently facing. And that would probably be more meaningful, significant, and useful than just delivering content and require them to memorize different pieces of knowledge. So let's explore a topic that is at the intersection of cutting-edge technology, human connection, and cultural preservation. As we stand at the threshold of a new era, AI and VE, as well as VR enhanced VE, are fundamentally reshaping how we communicate, collaborate, and engage with one another in digital spaces. These emerging communication modes are not just about transforming the way we connect. They're about revolutionizing the very nature of human interactions across cultural and linguistic boundaries. So I like to dive into socio-emotional and design thinking competencies at the heart of COL. These competencies are crucial in fostering empathy, enhancing collaboration, and empowering creative problem solving as we interact in diverse digital environments. Now, let's see some examples of emerging communication modes that we've been able to find in our virtual exchanges. Like I said, I was my students, history and culture students. Some of them are probably uh, attending this address, this communication. They were collaborating with the University of Limerick with Marta Forte's students. Marta also happens to be the keynote speaker of this year's symposium on gender, literatures, and cultures. And well, we applied different frameworks. The most noteworthy, or the one that is worth noting, was Norris's 2004 multimodal interaction analysis. We also followed Varonis and Gass's analysis of negotiation of meaning model, and we followed Wang and Tian's 2013 coding system. Norris multimodal interaction analysis emphasizes that communication is not just linguistic but involves multiple modes: speech, gesture, visual, digital interfaces. The quotes reflect these new multimodal communication dynamics in AI mediated interactions. We see students highlighting that using AI to communicate and to work on their projects help them have an immersive, realistic experience. This happened in the context of female biographies and also biographies of important, famous figures. And we have an example of Tupac, not a female, but one that some students were working on. They had to have live conversations through the Hello History app with those historical figures of the past, in this case, recent past, right, 90s, etc. So the students engaged through text, chat, voice, and collaborative scripting. They were writing scripts based on the information that they had gathered by conducting interviews in the first person uh, singular and plural, like I'm interviewing you, and we are going to go through your achievements, your main challenges that you faced, etc. And they were in general getting fairly accurate responses, but obviously there were some things that they were not so happy about. So we see a shift from text-based AI responses to voice-based apps, showing mode switching, which is a key concept in Norris's framework. We also see mentions of realism and multimodal affordances, including voice, text, and historical role play. However, in spite of the advantages and how cool it is to be able to have a real-time conversation with Tupac or with any other historical figures, there were also some drawbacks, and some students expressed dissatisfaction with some of the AI apps that they had used to communicate with those historical figures. They critique AI's one-dimensional and ghetto slang responses. They consider them fake and not aligned with the real way this historical figure, this person, this rapper would speak. So they considered that they are not appropriately integrating linguistic and sociocultural modes, just authentic Tupac speech patterns. Now, Norris would argue that AI-mediated communication requires better synchronization of linguistic, paralinguistic, and contextual modes. So applying this framework and judging from the quotes from students, we can say that the interaction was not very successful. Another important aspect that we highlighted in a conference session, a communication that we delivered, Marta Forte's keynote of this symposium, and I was her co-author, as well as Anna Nicolaou from Cyprus. There was a quote that we really liked. It was DIY rather than just AI. So the students preferred doing things themselves, filming, editing, over full AI reliance and that shows human agency in selecting the communication modes. That's what Norris would call modal density. They also curated their project by blending low-tech phones that could record their videos as well as high-tech editing software, in many cases highly sophisticated software, demonstrating multimodal orchestration. Now, moving on to Veronis and Gass's negotiation of meeting, or NOM model. This model explains how interlocutors resolve communication breakdowns through clarification requests, confirmation checks, and comprehension checks. The quotes reveal an OM in human-AI interaction. So this model is from the 80s, and obviously AI was not around in its current form. It existed already. I'm not going to say it didn't exist, but it didn't exist in its current highly advanced form. But we see now that this framework was applied to human interaction, and we see now how it can be applied and what we observe when we apply it to human AI interaction. And the next quote is about how students discovered a real app that helped them document the answers they needed, showing negotiation and how they switch different apps and try to apply problem solving until they find the adequate response. So this follows the trigger resolution cycle highlighted by Varonis and Gass. The switch from ChatGPT to a specific voice app can be seen as a strategic shift to improve meaning making. In this model, the previous quote about not being satisfied with the answers because AI tried too hard to use ghetto slang when trying to impersonate Tupac, we see a clear communication breakdown. That's a trigger due to AI's inauthentic register. In human conversations, this would prompt negotiation strategies. What do you mean by that? Why don't you try to sound, or why don't you try a bit less hard to sound like Tupac, and don't overuse ghetto slang, etc. The student's frustration mirrors NOM's non-understanding phase without resolution. And they also mention potential for AI to provide outdated, incorrect info. This shows preemptive negotiation that takes place when students, in this case, show their awareness of AI's limitations and adjust their expectations. Now, moving on to 1 in 10's coding system, which quantifies NOM occurrences, we might categorize the different primes, initial prompts, questions to AI, the NOM instances, such as rephrasing queries, switching apps, critiquing responses, etc. So these are different negotiation moves, and the quotes suggest, in some cases, explicit negotiation, such as when they mentioned we had to carry out and try out different questions. We see how students refine their queries to improve AI responses. There are also cases of implicit negotiation. For example, when students say, we transfer the questions to the GTP chat and then discovered a real app. That's the strategy shift due to inadequate AI performance. We also saw this with Norris's framework. And regarding coding potential, we see examples of confirmation checks. Was Tupac really like this? Did he really sound like this? And there was implied dissatisfaction in that. Other comprehension checks could be, the switching apps after ChatGPT failed could be considered an example of comprehension checks. Finally, regarding synthesis, the new communication modes show multimodality, follow Norris's framework, highlighting how AI forces users to navigate text, voice, and contextual modes. Regarding the negotiation of meaning, following Varonis's and Gass's model, human-AI interaction lacks dynamic negotiation, and that leads to breakdowns, for example, generic AI responses. But as we know, meaning negotiation is actually a good thing when we want to learn a language. So it's maybe not that bad that AI is not perfect, that artificial intelligence is not, at least not yet, superior to a human intelligence. And the benefits of this in terms of languages learning is that students need to really negotiate, develop strategies, and with that, language acquisition is fostered. And then in terms of coding, following Wan and Tian, we saw students' adaptive strategies such as app switching, DIY editing, and we can say, or we can interpret this as considering that these function as compensatory negotiation moves. In conclusion, we are now starting to see the potential of human AI interaction, in this case for languages learning and for learning about different languages, cultures, historical figures. We saw AI, voice apps, DIY media that are combined, and these require multimodal flexibility. They also expose gaps in AI's ability to negotiate meaning. So future designs should integrate better NOM mechanisms. For example, AI that asks clarifying questions and richer multimodal alignment. For example, a more culturally responsive AI. To conclude, the integration of immersive VR and AI programs can offer transformative potential for language learning, intercultural competence, and group work. So you can see here that I'm not against banning AI in the classroom. I'm in favor of integrating it in a way that is useful to students and that really leads to learning and in languages learning context that helps them learn languages. Another example that I would like to deal with is not connected to AI. It's connected to VR, virtual reality, used in the context of a virtual exchange. In a paper that I co-authored together with Chen, we mentioned that VR, in this case in VE, eliminates physical, geographical, and I would add linguistic barriers. Using multimodal, I would add also kinesthetic resources, verbal, visual, gestural, and spatial, and fostering deep connections with diverse cultures and communities, while offering authentic language practice beyond the classroom in real learning contexts, enhancing flexibility in time, space, and communication with dynamic environments for natural and fluid interaction. So what's interesting here is that we detected new ways of communicating that were not exactly connected to face-to-face communication, and they were not exactly the kind of communication that we have when we are speaking through video conferencing in 2D. So 3D VR communication brings about whole new kind of blended ways of communication. And we identified different categories of semiotic modes. For example, for verbal modes, we saw linguistic and paralinguistic cues that were exchanged among students. Visual modes included avatar representations and real person representations, very often on the same screen. So we can see that I'm here speaking, and then my avatar is also there. And we can have this window for the video conferencing part, but then the avatar is there in the 3D world interacting and performing all kinds of body movements that I wouldn't be able to perform so well in a 2D context because, this window only shows part of myself and not my whole self. And also, it wouldn't be the same as face-to-face communication because face-to-face is highly contextualized in the real context, so that it's limited by what we see around us, the objects, etc. Whereas in a virtual reality context, we are seeing all kinds of things all at once. So I can jump from a plane, and then I'm riding my car next to you, and then we're hiking the highest peak in the world, or a peak that is even higher that exists in a different planet, in a planet that might not even exist. So there's definitely other possibilities that are not part of the 2D, rather the face-to-face experience. There's also gestural modes that are brought into the picture, and that includes facial expressions, gestures, gaze, body postures, head movements. And then there's the spatial mode that I just mentioned, proxemics, and maybe in a virtual meeting, in a just 2D meeting, I wouldn't just sit down next to you, but that's something acceptable in the 3D world, even though I might have just have met you right? And there were also other semiotic modes, such as object handling, that again wouldn't be possible or would be very limited in face-to-face communication, depending on what we have around us, but it's limitless in a virtual reality context. And then it wouldn't happen in a 2D virtual communication context because it's basically we're video conferencing. I'm not going to be handling a whole wide list of different objects. They won't be accessible to me. So by recording students' interactions, what we did is we used both an external camera and a built-in camera on the Oculus headsets. We could gather valuable information about their interactions. In the first one, we don't have much time to get into detail, but basically the negotiation of meaning took place when one student was trying to explain what a typhoon was. He was from Taiwan. So he was trying to explain a Spanish student what a typhoon is. We have another example, mooncake. Again, some cultural knowledge that is being shared and that the virtual world allowed for more elaboration on what it is, the mooncakes that they eat during a holiday in Taiwan, how you make them. And in this case, something interesting was the blend between the immersive VR space and the physical immediate space of the student when she was putting her Oculus, her headsets up to Google some information without the interlocutor noticing anything, and then joining back the conversation to explain and to give more details about mooncake as a very knowledgeable person, as an expert, even though she has just Googled the information. And that was captured by the external camera, and that's how we as researchers know it, but the interlocutor didn't have and didn't notice anything at all. So we see different semiotic resources and immersive VE. We see a wide range of modes, as I explained earlier. So I would like to conclude with some pedagogical implications. And these are that these immersive and multimodal environments support face-to-face like interaction, but with a wider range of tools that can be used that you wouldn't normally use in face-to-face interaction and you wouldn't use in 2D virtual communication either. So that's why we're now starting to speak about emerging communication modes. And we are also noticing a shift for language learning from physical spaces to immersive spaces, distributed communities, and embodied learning through the use of avatars. For learners, we see new multimodal literacy skills that are starting to be developed and that are somewhere in between physical and virtual 2D interactions. For social-emotional competences, I would like to highlight, because I don't have much time to get into detail, that the main social-emotional skills that we are focusing on in our current project in virtual exchange are empathy, emotional regulation, interpersonal communication, resilience, collaboration, and conflict resolution. So as you can see, all these are key, not just to academic success, but also to well-being and lifelong learning. However, we're not just focusing on well-being because that term might be a bit limited. And rather than focusing on well-being, we are embracing the concept of flourishing. That's not simply well-being. It can happen in contexts where the person doesn't have the highest rates of well, it's not ranking very high in terms of material wealth or has some difficult situations in their lives, but they still manage to have a strong sense of purpose, meaning. They have abilities to create strong relationships and to grow personally. And this is taken in alignment with holistic educational goals that we are implementing in the classroom. For design thinking, what we're trying to do is to get students to not just use AI and VR to learn languages and to practice languages, but to actually solve problems with technology by using their creativity, by being innovative. And this is bringing new forms of expression and conceptual assimilation. And therefore, in an article that I co-authored together with Amir Rahimi, we identified different DIL phases as predictors of L2 motivation and L2 grit. So if anyone is interested, you can write to me so that I can give you more details about it. The phases that we identified were define, ideate, test, and prototype. And a very important feature is that we found authenticity gap, and AI feedback significantly correlated with the authenticity gap, meaning that AI can be perceived, an AI context can be perceived just as authentic and even more authentic than other language learning contexts. And the last topic that I wanted to cover today, but unfortunately I'm running out of time, is social justice and critical computer-assisted language learning. In this case, through the TALIS initiatives, we're trying to foster and revitalize endangered languages and cultures. We have Decolonial, you've seen different talks about it on the symposium. We have the CLAP initiative to bring linguistics into non-linguistic contexts, to explain what different contributions of linguistics to society. And then with Global Mindanao and with gender perspectives in the Dominican Republic, we've tried to combine different illustrated stories. In the case of Mindanao in the Philippines, we have 50 illustrated stories, and we also have a project with Espiritu Santo in Brazil that has brought in many different stories, and I would like to thank all the UV students that have also been involved in these projects. So with Global Mindanao, we're fostering multilingual education as a pathway to inclusivity. With the literacy project from gender perspectives in the Dominican context, we're trying to foster dialogic reading with feminist literary criticism. And with the Afro-Indigenous Brazilian Escuchar project, we are thinking, or we are getting inspiration, drawing inspiration from the idea of Krenax that we can tell stories to postpone the end of the world. Because when we hear all these end of world narratives, we can see that these are maybe attempts to make us give up on our dreams. So it's important to bring in this counter narrative and try to inhabit the place of dreams, a space inhabited and visited by shamans and people with magical power and storytellers. We're all, in one way or another, storytellers. We need to bring this magic of stories and myths and all the teachings that are behind those into our lives and our dreams. So as concluding remarks, we see new modes of communication, collaboration brought about by AI and VR, but while focusing on all these cutting-edge technologies, we shouldn't leave different ethno-linguistic groups behind. We should make sure that we bring in marginalized voices, and in our case, we've done that through intercultural, feminist, and decolonial perspectives as transformative call. And we are trying to equip students to become active change agents that are capable of facing 21st century challenges, that are capable of thriving in an ever-changing, very fluid present future. So going back to the magic ball to see the future, what we'd like to bring is a shared vision for the future, where communication is a tool for resistance, healing, and hope. And we'd love to keep telling stories to postpone the end of the world. In Krenak's words, we are postponing the end of the world by keeping on dancing, singing, telling stories, even in the face of catastrophes. And this, I would say, can give us a lot of inspiration to reimagining call as a tool for sustainable, inclusive futures that we are creating. And by reimagining the future, we are realizing that dreaming is not escape. It's a way of creating other possibilities of existence. So with this wonderful indigenous wisdom, I'd like to conclude. Here's my list of references that I used in this presentation. And if anyone has any questions, comments, I'll be very happy to hear them and to try and address them. Thank you very much.